Alimentary canal, also called the gastrointestinal tract, performs the whole menu of digestive functions. Ingests, digests, absorbs, and defecates. Organs of the alimentary canal: mouth, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small intestine and large intestine. Accessory digestive organs: teeth, tongue and several large digestive glands assist digestive breakdown. Oral cavity: mouth, a mucous membrane-lined cavity. Labia, lips, protect anterior opening. Cheeks, form lateral walls of the oral cavity. Hard palate, forms anterior roof of oral cavity. Soft palate, forms posterior roof of oral cavity. Uvula, fleshy finger-like projection of the soft palate, which extends inferiorly from the posterior edge of the soft palate. Vestibule, the space between the lips and cheeks externally and the teeth and gums internally. Oral cavity proper, the area contained by the teeth. Tongue and attachments, occupies the floor of the mouth. Bones attached include hyoid bone and the styloid processes of the skull. Lingual tonsil, covers the base of the tongue. Palatine tonsils, at the posterior end of the oral cavity are paired messes of lymphatic tissue. Masticating, chewing. Papilla, taste buds on the tongue surface. Pharynx, posterior to the oral cavity. Pharynx, subdivided into the nasopharynx, oropharynx and laryngopharynx. Laryngopharynx, continuous with the esophagus. Esophagus, gullet, runs from the pharynx through the diaphragm to the stomach. Four basic tissue layers of the esophagus to the large intestine. Mucosa, Submucosa, Muscularis Externa, Serosa. Mucosa, the innermost tissue layer of the alimentary canal organs, a moist membrane that lines the cavity or lumen of the organ. It consists primarily of a surface epithelium, plus a small amount of connective tissue and a scanty smooth muscle layer. Submucosa, found just beneath the muscosa. It is a soft connective tissue layer containing blood vessels, nerve Endings: mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue and lymphatic vessels. Muscularis Externa. A muscle layer typically made up of an inner circular layer and an outer longitudinal layer if smooth muscle cells. Serosa. Outermost layer of the tissue wall in the alimentary canal. It consists of a single layer of flat, serous fluid-producing cells, the visceral peritoneum. Visceral peritoneum is continuous with slick, slippery parietal peritoneum, which lines the abdominopelvic cavity by way of a membrane extension, called the mesentery. Visceral peritoneum. A single layer of flat, serous fluid-producing cells. Parietal peritoneum. The visceral peritoneum is continuous with this slick and slippery stuff. Mesentery. Membrane extension lined with parietal peritoneum. Peritonitis. When peritoneum is infected, the peritoneal membranes tend to stick together around the infection site. 2 intrinsic nerve plexuses. Submucosal nerve plexus and mesenteric nerve plexus. Cardioesophageal sphincter. Food enters the stomach through from the esophagus. Pyloric sphincter. Where chyme enters the small intestine from the stomach. Ruga. Mucosa collapses inward on itself in the stomach when it is empty into these large folds. Greater curvature. Lesser omentum. A double layer of peritoneum extends from the liver to the lesser curvature. Greater omentum. Extension of peritoneum drapes downward and covers the abdominal organs like a lacy apron before attaching to the posterior body wall, riddled with fat that insulates, cushions and protects abdominal organs. Yellow arrow. Enzymes and site of action for carbohydrate digestion. Salivary amylase site of action equals mouth. Pancreatic amylase site of action equals small intestine. Enzymes and site of action for glucose and other OSCs. Brush border enzymes in small intestine: dextrinase, glucoamylase, lactase, maltase and sucrase. Site of action equals small intestine. Enzymes and site of action for protein digestion. Pepsin in presence of HCl. Site of action equals stomach. Enzymes and site of action for small polypeptides digestion. Pancreatic enzymes: trypsin, chymotrypsin, carboxypeptidase and peptidase. Site of action equals small. Intestine. Enzymes and site of action for amino acids digestion. Brush border enzymes, aminopeptidase, carboxypeptidase and peptidase, site of action equals small intestine. Enzymes and site of action for fat digestion. Unemulsified fats emulsified by the detergent action of bile salts from the liver, site of action equals small intestine. Pancreatic lipase, site of action equals small intestine. Gastric pits. Many deep, narrow channels in the stomach lining that lead into gastric glands. Gastric juice. Digestive secretions of the stomach glands, consisting chiefly of hydrochloric acid and mucin and the enzymes pepsin and renin and lipase. Intrinsic factor. A substance provided by the mucosa of the stomach and intestines that is essential for the absorption of vitamin B12. Chief cells. A cell of the gastric glands that secretes pepsinogen and gastric lipase. Pepsinogens. Protein digesting enzyme produced by chief cells. Parietal cells. Produces corrosive hydrochloric acid, which makes the stomach contents acidic and activates the enzymes, as in the conversion of pepsinogen to pepsin by hydrochloric acid. Enteroendocrine cells. Secrete hormones that regulate digestion. Chyme. A semi-liquid mass of partially digested food that passes from the stomach through the pyloric sphincter into the duodenum. Small intestine. The body's major digestive organ, a muscular tube extending from the pyloric sphincter to the large intestine. Large intestine. Longest section of alimentary tube, with an average length of 2 to 4 meters in a living person. Three subdivisions of small intestine. Duodenum, jejunum, ileum. Duodenum. First part of small intestines. Most digestion takes place. Chemicals released from liver, gall, bladder, and pancreas. Jejunum. Middle portion of small intestine where chemical digestion ends and absorption begins. Ileum. The last and longest portion of the small intestine, extends from the jejunum to the cecum of the large intestine, 60% in length of the small intestine. Ileocecal valve. Valve between the ileum of the small intestine and the cecum of the large intestine. Pancreatic ducts. ducts coming into the duodenum that transport enzymes from the pancreas. They complete chemical breakdown of foods in the small intestine. Bile duct. Tube that carries bile from the liver and gallbladder to the duodenum. Three structures that increase the absorption of the small intestine. Microvilli, villi, circular folds. Microvilli. Tiny hair-like projections of the cytoplasmic membrane located only in the small intestine to facilitate absorption by increasing surface area. Brush border. A term that describes the microvilli of the small intestine's lining. These microvilli tremendously increase the small intestine's absorptive capacity. It bears enzymes, brush border enzymes, that complete digestion of proteins and carbs. Villi. Finger-like projections of the mucosa that give it a velvety appearance and feel much like the soft nap of a towel. These projections aid in producing more surface area for absorption. Contains lacteals. Lacteal. Within each villus is a rich capillary bed and modified lymphatic capillary of the small intestine. Circular folds. Permanent ridges in the mucosa of the small intestine enhance absorption by increasing surface area and causing chyme to spiral rather than move in a straight line, also called plicae circulaires. Peyer's patches. Located on the walls of the ileum, work with the immune system to protect against the entry of pathogens through the digestive system. Subdivisions of the large intestine. Cecum, appendix, colon, rectum, anal canal. Cecum. The first part of the large intestine, into which the ileum opens. Appendix. A vestigial process that extends from the lower end of the cecum and that resembles a small pouch. Appendicitis. Inflammation of the appendix, usually due to obstruction or infection. Ascending colon. The part of the large intestine that ascends from the cecum to the transverse colon. Transverse colon. The part of the large intestine that extends across the abdominal cavity and joins the ascending to the descending colon. Descending colon. The part of the large intestine that descends from the transverse colon to the sigmoid colon. Sigmoid colon. An S-shaped structure that continues from the descending colon above and joins with the rectum below. Anus. A muscular opening at the end of the rectum through which waste material is eliminated from the body. External anal sphincter. Voluntary skeletal muscle that controls the expulsion of feces from the anal canal. Internal anal sphincter. Involuntary smooth muscle and anal canal remains closed until pressure of feces opens it. Haustra. Pouches in the wall of the large intestine that expand to accommodate the bulk of undigested materials. Salivary glands. 3 pairs of exocrine glands in the mouth that secrete saliva: the parotid, submandibular, submaxillary, and sublingual glands. Parotid glands. The largest of the salivary glands, which lie just below and in front of the ear. Mumps. An acute viral disease characterized by the swelling of the parotid glands, which are the salivary glands located just in front of the ears. Common childhood disease. Submandibular glands. In the floor of the mouth along the inner surfaces of the mandible, their ducts open into the mouth, behind the teeth on either side of the lingual frenulum. Sublingual glands. The smallest of the salivary glands located on the floor of the mouth, which empty into the mouth. Saliva. The fluid released when the mouth waters that plays an important role in both mechanical and chemical digestion, aids in binding food together into a bolus. Bolus. A term used to describe food after it has been chewed and mixed with saliva. Salivary amylase. An enzyme that is a bicarbonate-rich, alkaline juice that begins the process of starch digestion in the mouth. Pancreas. A soft pink triangular gland that extends across the abdomen from the spleen to the duodenum. Produces enzymes that break down all kinds of foods, or also produces insulin and glucagon. Liver. Largest gland in the body, has 4 lobes, produces bile. Falciform ligament. A ligament that attaches part of the liver to the diaphragm and the abdominal wall. Bile. A mixture of salts and phospholipids that aids in the breakdown of fat. It is produced in the liver. Common hepatic duct. duct which carries bile out of the liver to the cystic duct or the common bile duct and delivers the bile into the duodenum. Gallbladder. A sac on the underside of the liver that stores bile provided by the liver. Cystic duct. When food is not digested, bile backs up into this and enters the gallbladder to be stored. Gallstones. Small hard particles made of cholesterol which form and collect in the gallbladder may block the bile duct, causing pain and discomfort. Treated by surgical removal of the gallbladder. Small hard particles made of cholesterol which form and collect in the gallbladder may block the bile duct, causing pain and discomfort. Treated by surgical removal of the gallbladder. When a blockage of the hepatic or bile ducts prevents bile from entering the small intestine, it puts pressure on the liver cells. The bile salts and pigments circulate through the body, making the tissues a yellow color. Hepatitis. Inflammation of the liver caused by a virus or a toxin. Cirrhosis. Chronic disease characterized by degeneration of liver tissue, most often caused by alcoholism or a nutritional deficiency. Cirro equals yellow, can cause jaundice. Ingestion. Food must be placed into the mouth before it can be acted on. This is active and a voluntary process. Peristalsis. Involuntary alternative waves of contraction and relaxation of the muscles in the organ wall, to squeeze the food along the tract. Segmentation. Moves food only back and forth across the internal wall of the organ. This serves to mix it with digestive juices. Mechanical digestion. Chemical digestion occurs when enzymes and other chemicals break down large food molecules into smaller ones. Mechanical digestion. Type of digestion, the process through which your food is physically broken down into smaller, more manageable pieces. The result is a physical change. Deglutition. Swallowing. Buccal phase. Chewing of the food. Pharyngeal esophageal phase. Involuntary portion of deglutition where food enters the esophagus and it carries it to the stomach. Gastrin. a digestive hormone secreted by the stomach lining, stimulates the secretion of fluid by gastric glands in the stomach. Heartburn. Inflammation of the esophagus can cause esophagitis. Hiatal hernia. Hernia resulting from the protrusion of part of the stomach through the diaphragm. Pepsin. A protein-digesting enzyme secreted by the chief cells of the gastric glands. It is secreted in its inactive form, pepsinogen, and is activated by gastric acid. It is unusual in that its pH optimum is around 1 to 2. Most of these enzymes in the body function best at neutral pHs. Emesis. Vomiting, reverse peristalsis. Brush border enzymes. Carried by the mucovae of the small intestine that breaks down double sugars into simple sugars. And complete protein digestion. Pancreatic juice. Liquid secreted by the pancreas which contains a variety of enzymes, aids in the digestion of fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. Pancreatitis. Destruction of the pancreatic cells from the blockage of bile duct which causes pancreatic enzymes to back up into the pancreas. Outcome can be fatal. Secretin and cholecystokinin influence the release of pancreatic juice and bile. Haustral contractions. Slow segmenting movements in the small intestine lasting about 1 minute that occur about every 30 minutes, aids in water absorption. Mass movements. Long, slow-moving contractile waves that move over large areas of the colon 3 or 4 times a day and force the contents toward the rectum. Diverticula. Mucosa protrudes through the colon walls. This condition is called diverticulosis. Diverticulitis. A condition in which the diverticula become inflamed, can be life-threatening if rupture occurs. Defecation reflex. Spinal reflex that causes the walls of the sigmoid colon and the rectum to contact and the anal sphincters to relax. Diarrhea. Watery stools result from any condition that rushes food residue through the large intestine before that organ has had sufficient time to absorb the water. Constipation. Food residue remains in the large intestine for extended periods. Too much water is absorbed and the stool becomes hard and difficult to pass. Lack of fiber in diet or poor bowel habits. ATP. chemical energy form needed by body cells to drive their many activities. Kilocalories. Energy value of foods, calories. Nutrient. A substance in food that is used by the body to promote normal growth, maintenance, and repair. Major nutrients. Carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins. These make up the bulk of what we eat. Minor nutrients. Vitamins and minerals required in minute amounts. Carbohydrates. Sugars and starches derived from plants. Lipids. Mostly triglycerides, neutral fats, energy-rich organic compounds such as fats, oils, and waxes that are made of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Proteins. Molecules that are basically amino acid polymers. Eggs, milk, fish, and most meat proteins are complete proteins, whereas legumes are incomplete proteins. Essential amino acids. 8 amino acids that our body cannot make must be taken in during diet. Vitamins. Organic nutrients of various forms that the body requires in small amounts. A balanced diet is the best way to ensure a full vitamin complement. Coenzymes. Most vitamins function as these. They act with an enzyme to accomplish a particular type of catalysis. Metabolism is a broad term referring to all chemical reactions that are necessary to maintain life. Catabolism, in which substances are broken down to simpler substances. Anabolism, in which larger molecules or structures are built from smaller ones. Glucose. Food sugar is the major breakdown product of the carbohydrate digestion. Cellular respiration. Process that releases energy by breaking down glucose or other food molecules in the presence of oxygen. Glycolysis. A metabolic process that breaks down carbohydrates and sugars through a series of reactions to either pyruvic acid or lactic acid and release energy for the body in the form of ATP. Krebs cycle. Second stage of cellular respiration, in which pyruvic acid is broken down into carbon dioxide in a series of energy-extracting reactions. Electron transport chain. A series of molecules, found in the inner membranes of mitochondria and chloroplasts, through which electrons pass in a process that causes protons to build up on one side of the membrane. Hyperglycemia. Abnormally high blood sugar usually associated with diabetes. Hypoglycemia. Abnormally low blood sugar usually resulting from excessive insulin or a poor diet. Acidosis or ketoacidosis, excessive acidity of blood due to an accumulation of acids or an excessive loss of bicarbonate. Breath takes on a fruity smell due to acetone entering the lungs. Urea. A soluble nitrogenous waste produced in the liver by a metabolic cycle that combines ammonia with carbon dioxide. Glycogen. Glucose is stored in the form of glycogen in liver cells. Glycogenesis. The conversion of glucose to glycogen when the glucose in the blood exceeds the demand. Glycogenolysis. Breakdown of glycogen to glucose. Gluconeogenesis. The formation of glycogen, a glucose-storing compound, from fatty acids and proteins rather than carbohydrates. Cholesterol. Not an energy fuel, 85% of it is made by our own liver, serves the structural basis of steroid hormones and vitamin D, and is a major building block of plasma membranes. Low-density lipoproteins. Transport cholesterol and other lipids to body cells, where they are used various ways. If large amount in blood, it can be deposited on the arterial walls. High-density lipoproteins. Lipoproteins that transport cholesterol from the tissue cells to the arteries for disposal in bile. Disposal in bile. Energy intake. The energy that is liberated during food oxidation equals total energy output, which is heat work energy. Storage. Energy output includes energy we immediately lose as heat, plus that used to do work, plus energy that is stored in the form of fat or glycogen. Basal metabolic rate is the amount of heat produced by the body per unit of time when it is under basal conditions at rest. Thyroxine, produced by the thyroid gland and is probably the most important factor determining a person's BMR. Hence, it has been dubbed the metabolic hormone. Hypothyroidism. Condition of hyposecretion of the thyroid gland causing low thyroid levels in the blood that result in sluggishness, slow pulse, and often obesity. Hyperthyroidism. excess thyroxine production, Graves' disease, caused by autoimmune disorder, symptoms, enlarged thyroid, muscle weakness, increased metabolic rate, sweating, etc. Treatment, remove thyroid, drugs. Total metabolic rate refers to the total amount of kilocalories the body must consume to fuel all ongoing activity that increase this.